one-stop shop for great wrestling. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell brings a host of great shows right to your device. There's the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Amazing Puro Academy Show, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's long-running hit, Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the hilarious Other Ship podcast, and a whole lot more. Great shows and great guests, but where do you find all this stuff? Really simple. Try logging on to WrestleCopia.com. As I like to say, it's your one-stop shop for great wrestling memories.
It's ring posts and retirement villages. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour.
Hey there, it's Bob Smith, formerly with PWI, and this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. How are you today? I'm going to take a break just for a second here, but I want to tell you that Ian Douglas is our guest of the show. It's his fourth appearance here, and he's got a new book out, and it's just out. It's so freshly out that if you order a copy right now, the pages will still be warm from the printer. It's amazing. In any event, hold on. Get yourself a wonderful beverage, and we'll be right back. Joe Puccio and I are going to talk. Man, we got the one and only prolific author himself, Ian Douglas. Don't you dare go anywhere.
This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/What is Ham Radio? See you on the air.
Hey, lads and lassies. Welcome to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. How you doing? Our guest this time out is the prolific, and I mean prolific. He had 2 books last year. Here's his first one of 2026. Ian Douglas is back with us, and he, along with editor Oliver Lee Bateman, have released just a couple of days ago as we record this, Highland Games and Hippodromes, Scottish Identity and Influence at the Dawn of the American Pro Wrestling Industry. We're talking late 1800s here. The book has a foreword by the one and only Drew McIntyre, and it has an afterwards by the noted historian Bradley Craig. So it's got all major league credentials. And speaking of major league, we have a co-host here who didn't even bother to put his name in the staff box. My gosh, he's not proud at all. It's Joe Puccio. How you doing, Joe?
Bob, that was an amazing Scottish impersonation. Wow. That was
was good?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Hey, laddie.
Yeah, I'm doing
That's
all right.
That's the whole thing. That's all I got.
That's all you got. That's all you need.
That's all I got. Maybe, hey, laddie, you do your bit of good. That's all I have. That's it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I put a name in the chat and then I walked away for a minute, came back, entered the chat, and must have, I don't know, maybe I left it too long, it disappeared. So today I'm just guest.
Well, my recording console had a problem. I'm in my studio, my electronic studio here, and when you record a file, it gives you the option to change the name of it immediately, which you should do. Because it's just a date, a bunch of words, recording such and such a date. Here's the time of it. That's all it says. So you want to change it so when you edit your podcast, you can tell what file it is. Yesterday it didn't work. Like I'm working on the next show and it didn't work. It's like I couldn't tell one file from another. and I did a Yosemite Sam for a while. "You diddly dead blame," just I was all upset. So I will say I called the company. I got a hold of the company. I said, "This isn't working." They said, "Uh-oh, we'll fix it." And I got an email this morning, and they fixed it. How do you like that?
There you go.
So
Progress.
so thank you to my, recording company. I really appreciate it. Well done. See, once in a while, you get good service, and isn't it amazing when you get good service in this day and age? It's like a miracle.
Yeah.
"Hey, I got a problem." "Okay. There, it's fixed." That never happens, particularly with doctors' offices. Have you noticed that? It took me 4 attempts this week to get a receipt. A receipt!
It's the little things, you know?
"We will email it to you, sir, by the end of day." "Thank you very much." "Our pleasure, sir." Check your email the next day, nothing. So I went back. "I didn't receive the email that you told me I was gonna get yesterday." "Sorry about that. We'll work on it today. You'll get it by the end of day today." "Thank you." "Thank you." Check the email the next day, nothing. Guess where I drove the next day to I literally drove out there because I know just talking to him on the phone was not gonna get the job done.
The best is when you are trying to get something done and you're faxing it or you're sending an email and you call up to make sure that they received it
Mhm.
and they tell you, "Well, no, sir, we haven't received it because it goes to another party first. It doesn't actually come to this location. So it's actually going to take a while." So it's like you're sending a fax or an email and it literally could take hours before they can confirm receipt. This happens a lot with me with our send a prescription into pet meds
Yeah,
for
yeah.
our dog, trying to get a prescription from the vet in, and oh no, we didn't receive it yet. Did you send it to the right fax number? Well, it goes to our bureau first. It doesn't come here first. It's like I'm just trying to get a kibble for my dog.
Yeah,
You know?
But there's the thing, I mean, and this company I'm talking about, it's a practice that has 8 local officers or something like that. But when you first call them, it goes to an office that isn't the office you're looking for, even though you
Exactly.
dialed the number of the office you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather fragga shagga fragga. That's Muttley from Dick Dastardly. That's all I have to say. Ragga fragga shag. Remember the
Yeah.
dog, the cowardly dog? Well, anyway, Scottish wrestling, something that only Ian Douglas would probably try to tackle because he has some Scottish lineage himself, believe it or not. But I was thinking, what about today? And what in recent who is Scottish? Who has real Scottish lineage? I kind of researched it just briefly and I looked and it was like, not that many.
Uh-huh.
There really haven't been that many, unless I'm missing a lot. But most of the names that I came up with were so obscure, I'm not even going to mention them here. But in current WWE, can you name a Scottish wrestler? Oh, this
Uh,
should just pop right into your head.
well, other than Drew McIntyre, you
That
mean?
bing, bing, bing. Yes. Wait a
Yeah,
minute.
there
Beep,
you
beep,
go.
beep, beep, beep. There we
I
go.
mean, obviously he's the big one, yeah.
Yes. Yes. He is from Ayr, AYR, in Scotland. Now, other notable wrestlers with Scottish blood in the current roster are Nikki Cross,
Yep.
right? Piper Niven, who, by the way, I hope she comes back. I think she's pretty hurt. Alba Fire, and a name I'm not familiar with, Isla Dawn.
Yes.
Is that maybe it's NXT person? That's why I don't.
Well, no, it's funny you mentioned her because, again, I didn't really have a lot of prep time here. But when you mentioned just briefly the Scottish slant on this, Isla Dawn is actually one of my favorites of the current crop of Scots. And actually, she's an interesting one. She actually got released by WWE very recently. I want to say within the last 3-4 months.
Okay.
And she just made an appearance in, I think she made 1 or 2 appearances already in AEW or then maybe it was Ring of Honor, but definitely with that brand. But she's really, really good. I wasn't too familiar with her before she entered WWE, but she started with NXT. Remember when they had the UK division, the
Yes.
NXT
Yeah.
UK?
Hmm.
That's where I first saw her. And I know she had a career before that. I'm sure she was in all the independents and everything, but that's where I really saw her. Then she moved to NXT and then eventually WWE. She's got a great gimmick. She's a really good wrestler. And yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites. So yeah, I'm definitely on board with her.
Okay. Sit down, put your thinking cap on, or your Carvel bowl. You have to mention Carvel, or people stop listening. Anyway, think about this one for a minute. Memphis, USWA CDWA, the Lawler era. What perennial star there was born in Scotland?
Got me on that one.
I gotta play the phone, you ever get on the phone with the doctor and he's not there? Dee, 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 right? You get that little theme and you sit there and listen to it for 46 minutes. Dee, 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 dee. Oh, anyway. Superstar Bill Dundee was born in Kirriemuir, Scotland,
Really?
but raised in Melbourne, Australia.
Okay.
But he's literally Scottish.
I never knew that. I would have never guessed him.
To be honest with you, I never knew it either.
Wow.
I didn't know it until I looked it up and I said, "Holy smokes."
Interesting.
Never made any reference to it or anything because he was essentially an Australian. Let's be, he may have come over as a baby or something, but he was born in Scotland.
Right, right, right.
Interesting, right?
It is.
Now, Roddy Piper played the bagpipes.
Yeah.
But as we all know, he was Canadian, but he was of Scottish descent. He does have a bit of Scottish blood.
Yes, I do remember reading that. What is it, like on his mother's side, I think, or I remember.
I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, he did have enough Scot in him to portray one. He really did learn the bagpipes.
Sure.
You know the famous story? I think he made an appearance early on television as like a one-off. We're talking about 80, 81 or something like that. He's got the bagpipes and supposedly Blasey Albano filled his bagpipes with some kind of stuff like laundry or something, and he's honking and honking, and he couldn't get it started. It sounded awful, and the tape exists out there.
Really?
You can find that one, yeah. And he just couldn't get the thing to work. He got a rib pulled his first time in the WWF.
But this actually made television?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think Joe McHugh was holding his microphone so that, he could play the bagpipe. It was just a bunch of noise.
That's great.
And you gotta find it. That's
I do.
worth seeking out. That's what's worth seeking out. And as legend has it, Piper was not happy years later even. Even when he re-entered the WWE, he was seeking out Blassie to, get his just
Held a
desserts,
grudge?
as it were. Yeah, well, I would too. It's his first time on WTV, and what shocked me is they showed it.
Yeah, that's why I'm surprised. That's why I said, did it make TV? I'm surprised that
I
they.
am shy too, but I saw it just a couple of years ago. Some nice person posted it on YouTube. Thank you, you YouTube people out there. It's fantastic. But he used to come out, with the kilt, the bagpipe entrance music, billing from Glasgow. Who cared? He was great no matter where he was from.
It's interesting, right? That everybody. I think if you asked fans of years gone by pro wrestling, who's the greatest Scottish wrestler? I mean, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get your average fan naming Roddy Piper. And it's so crazy that, yes, he does have a little bit of in him, but I mean, through and through, he's a Canadian. And it's crazy that he's become so associated with Scottish heritage,
Right.
with the bagpipes and just his kilt and just everything about him, it's pretty interesting.
There's a photo that somebody puts out on Facebook and stuff every Christmas. And it's Roddy Piper and a Santa Claus visiting a young girl who has cancer or something in the hospital, presenting her with a gift. And the look on the girl's face and the look on Roddy's face, it is one of the sweetest photographs I have ever seen. You have to see it to be moved by it.
Wow.
Try to find that one. Roddy Piper, Santa, and a little sick girl. Unbelievable. What a cool guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody that takes their time to go visit sick kids, you got my lifelong admiration. I mean that. I really mean that. Well, my thing in my life that I cannot abide is abused or sick children. I can't abide it. My head goes fuzzy just hearing about it or seeing any depiction like that. So those who take time out of their schedules to do things like that, like John Cena used to do it, you're A-okay with me, you guys. You really are. You're my heroes. You really are. I'm such a softy. I'm sorry.
Nah, but by all accounts, though, Piper seemed to be a great. I actually only met him once at a show, and just a brief conversation with him, and he seemed like pretty down to earth. And I know just from others in the industry, he had his wild side, and he different things, but for the most part, he always seemed like he sort of had his head on straight. I know he had a kind of a crazy childhood too, living on the streets and things like that, but he really made something of himself. And it's hard to believe that he's been gone, like it's got to be about 10 years by now that
it's been gone a long time. And I will say this too, I'm thinking, did I meet him? Well, in a way, I did. I did a long interview with him on the phone for PWI when They Live was coming out,
Oh,
and I
nice.
milked that. I used quotes from that for about
Yeah.
5 years. It's because we talked about various things and stuff like that, and whether he was ever coming back to the WWF at that point because he had left
Yeah.
after the Adonis thing. Went right, and I thought he was gonna be a major acting star after They Live came, and that movie was a hit,
It was a big hit.
and it was a great movie. If you're into sci-fi, that one is A plus in my book. It was a legitimately good movie.
Great movie. I watched it, not too long ago. It's got that great fight scene. Yeah, yeah. He was good in it. Piper was good. I
He
mean,
was he
he
was
wasn't
he was understated by his
right.
the one line that everybody uses now. "I came here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of bubble gum."
Yep, yep,
How many
yep.
people have used that on you?
Yeah, and people still say that to me. I have friends that we still quote that line. That's such a good line,
It's
and
such a good line.
I would put him as my personal favorite heel of all time would probably be Roddy Piper. I mean, I'm not gonna say the best or who's the, this and that,
Right.
but I mean,
Just
for my
the
money,
one you enjoyed the most, yeah.
he's the one I enjoyed the most. I mean, I've said how I've had my favorites when I grew up, guys like Paul Orndorff and Don Morocco and people like that. But as far as just a true heel and just the way he used to rile up the fans, I don't think I ever got it more enjoyment than watching Roddy Piper.
Wow, who's my favorite heel? I never
It's a
thought
tough question.
and I don't even have I know who my favorite wrestler is who was a heel, but I didn't consider him a heel. I just liked his shtick, Cicluna. Let's do a favorite show soon. Mine and your favorites. We'll just talk about that. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Just nothing official, just the things that we got a rise out of back in the day. That's a
Yeah,
good one.
yeah.
Now I have more Scottish folks for you. The Highlanders, Robbie and Rory
Yes.
McAllister.
Yeah, I
They were in
remember
the
them.
WWE in the mid 2000s. They were a tag team in the WWE. Here's one that goes back from my day, the 60s and 70s. Black Angus Campbell. Known as Black Angus, he was also known as Wild Angus and Rasputin.
Hmm.
Big hairy guy. Big hairy ruffian, yeah. I saw him in the wrestling magazines.
Yeah, yeah.
The yellow paper magazine, those type. They had Black Angus. That's the way I always pronounce it. Now, the last person I'm gonna bring up in terms of name, and this is it. This is about all I could find with, like, pure Scottish blood or whatever you wanna call it, but there was a guy named George Kidd, and this is a really cool story. He was born in 1925, he died in 1998. The usual, he's a pro wrestler in Scotland, later became a TV voice because that's how it works. Even Bruno did that. But according to legend, he had more than 1,000 matches and lost 7 times.
Really?
Really. Now, being that his career probably started in the 40s, some of those might have been on the up and up. I don't know how many.
Yeah, you never know, I guess, back then.
Yeah. He was the first entrant into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame for Scotland, which has a website, which is founded by wrestling historian Bradley Craig, who contributed to the book that Ian Douglas just wrote.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But George Kidd, wow. By the way, you just type in Scottish Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in your browser, and you will find another really cool website devoted to. I'd say there's probably about 10 wrestlers in that Hall of Fame, maybe a few more, but it's a pretty cool website, and you'll learn stuff. And you'll definitely learn stuff listening to Ian later on. My gosh. Dude, I'm interviewing him, and he's talking away about stuff in the book, all these facts and figures and names. He's not even looking at anything. It's coming out of his cranium. What a smart man Ian Douglas is. Holy smokes.
You could tell just from the research and just from the books that he writes. I
Yeah.
mean, and he's been on the show before. I mean, really, really intelligent. And
You're
yeah, I
gonna
don't know how he keeps those facts in his head.
It's amazing, and you're gonna like this one, you really are, and I'll tell you what, once you get into even the first chapter, the meat of the earliest, Scottish wrestling stars and what the phrase hippodrome means in wrestling parlance, you will be surprised. It starts to read like a current book. This was going on behind the scenes. This guy
Right.
screwed over the other guy. This guy didn't get paid. The same thing a century earlier. It's great. It's another good book. You're really gonna like it.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that one. As you're talking here, I'm just kind of the wheels are turning. I just thought of another
Scottish
Scottish
wrestler? Okay.
wrestler, yeah, but it's actually a current wrestler, Joe Hendry.
That's right. You're absolutely right about that. That
I
is true.
as you're talking, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, wait a minute, he's Scottish, right? I actually had to ask myself, but yeah, he is.
He
He's
doesn't play it
certainly
up though, does he?
He not really.
Is he announced as being from Scotland?
I believe so. Yeah.
Wow. I
I
didn't
mean, I could be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he is. But I mean, that guy is pretty over now. He's not really my cup of tea. I'm not a huge fan of the whole, I believe in Joe Hendry gimmick, but it doesn't matter. He's pretty over, and
know.
we'll see how he does in WWE, which he's with now.
Joe Hendry is the kind of wrestler that, to be fair, I know I'm older, but it's the kind of wrestler that makes me wanna call Best Buy and so they can help me pitch my expensive OLED TV out the window. I just don't like the gimmick. It
Yeah,
kills me. It's another, Orange Cassidy. I don't
yeah,
need it. Oh my god, it's awful.
I,
It's just slightly bad or kinda bad. It's ridiculous.
yeah.
How does that get you and he's over. He's
Well,
over like Rover.
that's what I'm saying. I mean, when I first saw him, I guess I first saw him in TNA, which was where he was first. I was like, "Oh, this is dumb. This guy's not gonna go anywhere." And then the fans, you heard that music, and they really do pop for him. I mean, I thought it was weird that WWE brought him in. Was that last year or the year before when they brought him in for that like surprise WrestleMania
He
spot where
took
he got
on Randy Orton.
Randy Orton? Yeah. And I was a little surprised at that they had him just come in and kind of lose pretty quick to Orton. But I guess the jury's out on how he'll do long term in WWE, whether it's like one of those gimmicks that wears out pretty quickly. But so far, it's been going on for several years, and it doesn't
Yeah,
seem to really lose any steam.
but recently in the main show, he came out with a guitar and did a comedy shtick right at the beginning of one of the shows. So I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
did he? Okay.
yeah, oh man." Otis and, Tozawa dancing and stuff I mean, it was just,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
there are things that offend me worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
But everything offends me because I'm 106 years old. That's the
And
thing. And speaking of offending a lot of people, did you see my repost on Facebook this past week, last few days? There is an
refresh my memory.
independent wrestler, and his name is Jesus,
Yes, I did see
and
this.
he dresses like Jesus, and he gets into the ring and points and gestures, and the wrestlers go flying, and it's offensive for only about 150 different things. I think the caption I put on it was, "I think my wish to go attend as many indies as I possibly can is a really fricking bad idea." Oh, man, did you see those clips?
Once you gave me that hint, yeah, I certainly remembered. And the funny thing is, I've seen that, not that specific clip, but I think I've seen that gimmick once before on Facebook or somebody posted something like that.
Right.
I'm curious, is that a specific promotion that does stuff like this, or was
Beats
this just
me.
like a
It never
one-off?
comes with any information.
Oh,
But the
okay.
one I saw, the crowd was going ape, "Yay!" And I'm like, unless it's an organization called Sunday School Wrestling or something like that, I can't imagine that going over. I would be booing, I would be leaving. And it has nothing to do with religion. It's like, who is it? Joey it's like Joey Ryan.
Yeah,
You can't do this. You cannot do this.
yeah.
Or, I hate to say it, Kenny Omega, same thing, that Jim Cornette complained about him.
Oh, the
Wrestling a
match
love
with the
doll,
girl?
wrestling an 8-year-old girl.
Yeah,
You can't do this. You
yeah.
cannot do it. You can't do it. Go join the Savannah Bananas or something. Don't just, it's, ugh.
I
I'm
think they're
sorry. I'm sorry. Listen, I will always be nostalgic for the ring with the state athletic commission announcers named, with the old man ring announcer, with the opponent here and an opponent over there, and one light over the ring, ding, 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 and off to the races. It's all you ever needed. Everything since then has been window dressing, and that's the way I'm always going to feel. I can't help it.
I think there are some indies out there that actually that's why I was asking where it was from, because I really think there are some that's what they specialize in, believe it or not.
Yeah,
I
all
think
that
that
silly stuff. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
like that their whole shtick is basically just crazy gimmicks and just plays on real, real words or other gimmicks. And I can't think of anything offhand, but I know that it's been out there before. I don't believe I've ever been to a show like that, but yeah, I've definitely seen clips of it, clips of
yeah.
stuff like that.
I almost fell on the floor. And then I fall on the floor at the usual AEW weekly clip that I'll repost and go, number 4 in a series. Because
Yeah.
they use as their sizzle reel the most dangerous spots.
Yeah.
The whole mindset is wrong.
Yeah. a lot of the stuff they put, I don't completely agree with. Again, I'm sort of in between on because I do enjoy their product for the most part, but mostly they're good matches. I mean, they have so many good wrestlers and they still put on a ton of great stuff, whether or not they poking each other with forks and things like that, of course. But I mean, they have a lot of quality content as well. But I hear you.
And I don't like saying it. I don't like feeling this way. I'm just waiting for something really bad to happen. I'm just waiting. Remember, that all gets greenlit. I don't blame the wrestlers. I'm blaming Tony Khan. Period. End stop. Full stop. That's it. I'm blaming him. He's the boss. He could tamper this down all by himself. Say, hey, look, guys, come on, be safe. And now you have a bunch of people, like I say, on the internet, Maven and Stevie Richards and Matt Hardy and William Regal, all within about a 10 days time talking about this kind of thing online. It's spreading now. This movement is spreading, is that
Yeah.
the risks are just too great. And I'm doing it because I respect wrestlers. If I like you or don't like you as a wrestler, it has nothing to do with the fact I want you to stay alive and not limp when you're 50 years old. That's it. That's I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah. But I do have one more Scottish wrestler
Where are
that
you coming up with these? This is great. Okay.
I'm just thinking about it, but I'm wondering if you know who this is
All right.
because have you ever heard of somebody named, pronounce it right here, Grado?
Like the cheese you dump on spaghetti? Oh, no, okay.
I
No,
believe
I have not heard of Grado.
I believe it's Grado, so I think the pronunciation is Grado. But anyway, this just came to mind because this guy is, I believe he's still around, but he was around maybe like 5-10 years ago, and he's really big in Europe. And I do remember seeing him pretty often in TNA. He might have even done an appearance or two in AEW, but I'm not 100% on that. But I do know I saw him in TNA, and he's got this huge cult following. And I remember when he showed up in TNA, don't ask me why I remember this, but I know his entrance theme on all the indies is a Madonna song. I want to say Like a Prayer. Don't ask me why,
Okay.
but it's a Madonna song. And then there was this whole big to do when he showed up in TNA because he couldn't use that because of the rights to the song and people were up in arms or whatever. So it's like he's a very big cult figure, especially in independent circles. You can look him up, but I do know he's from Scotland. He's Scottish.
Okay.
And he's kind of like a comedy. I think he's more like a comedy character, much more comedy than say like a Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry might have a comedy gimmick, but he's a serious wrestler when he's in the ring. But this guy, I think, was more of like a comedy routine. And I think he's still around.
All right. I'll look into Grado.
We'll see what your opinions are on Grado.
I'll look into Grado. You see, I learned something today.
That's all I got, though. I
right.
just racked my brain. I'm like, I can't think of anybody else.
Listen, we did well enough. This is fine. So anyway, we welcome Ian to the show and Mr. Puccio with the GenerationXWire.com. Lately, he has taken on interviewing some of the 1980s real femme fatales, if you know what I mean, guys. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Tell us more. Oh, please tell us more and show me photos. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we're doing pretty, we have a lot of new content. We have content on Morgan Fairchild. People from our age range, I'm certain, remember her. I'm sure you know her pretty well, Bob.
My little heart's going thump-a-thump.
Soap operas and movies, and she has a career, things like Dallas and Falcon Crest and soap and daytime soaps, things like that. So we'll have something with her coming up shortly.
Did you see the People magazine cover I sent you?
No,
You didn't?
no.
I sent you a pic because she was, I think it was People magazine, and the headline is Morgan Fairchild, Too Sexy for TV. That was the headline on the cover.
I got to check that out. I don't
Check
remember
your
seeing
phone.
that.
I think I sent it to you
Oh,
on
you
your phone.
texted it to me? Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah.
So she was so big they were questioning whether she was sending people into frenzies out there.
Wow. Yeah.
She was real, and she was a major star at that point. She was in demand for movies and TV spots and everything
She
else.
was.
Big on the talk shows. She was a major star.
She really was. We also, speaking of hot, Rhonda Shear We did a huge feature on her. And for those who are not familiar with the name, she was the host of Up All Night on USA in the 90s, where they had B movies, get to know about her career. And yeah, so we got some things coming up. I'm working on a couple of wrestling ones as well.
Well, there you go, folks. It's real easy to find. GenerationXwire.com, all one word. You will have fun, and it'll give you information you will not find anyplace else. Anyplace else. Joe, thank you again for your contribution this week. We really appreciate it, as always.
Thank you, Bob. As always, I love being here, and I am looking forward to hearing Ian.
Ah, laddie. There you go. That's the only invitation I got right there. That's all I can say. Count to about 9.5. We're going to hit you with the great Ian Douglas, his fourth appearance here. I think he may have. Steve Gennarelli gets the red. You know how on SNL they give you the red sport coat if
Yeah.
you've been on 5 times. I think Gennarelli is our number one overall guest.
He's got to be.
Ian is creeping up on him, though. He really is. That's because Ian puts out a book every 60 days or something, so it's like easier to do. And in any event, you're going to love the book, and you're going to love hearing from Ian Douglas. We'll be right back in just a second. Four times. I'm lucky enough to have the great author Ian Douglas on my show 4 times. You all love him. The numbers prove it. He's a best-selling wrestling writer, and he's got a brand new book out. It's called Highland Games and Hippodromes, Scottish Identity and Influence at the Dawn of the American Pro Wrestling Industry. Once again, his editor is Oliver Lee Bateman. He's got a foreword by a guy you might have heard of named Drew McIntyre, and afterward by Bradley Craig. He's prolific. He's terrific. He's Ian Douglas. Welcome back.
What an intro. Bob, thank you so much for having me once again. I don't know why you're slumming it and having me on 4 times. It's been such an honor, but thank you again for being willing to talk pro wrestling with me.
That's how many current books you've had in the last, since I've started this thing. I mean, all the books I believe that we've talked about were current. You had 2 last year, and they went great guns. And I travel around, as you know, and I was up at the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame run by Seth Turner up there. The fact that this past year they had a very special inductee, and I'm sure you had something to do with that.
Clarence Bolden
Right.
is probably who you're referring to. I introduced I made the acquaintance of the Bolden family after the book was released, and I believe what happened is I sent an email to Seth and the other board members of the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, just making them aware that Clarence Bolden, as far as my research indicated, that he was the first wrestler, at least in North America, of significant Black ancestry to earn or win a world championship and be regarded as such for a period of years. And no one was aware of this during his lifetime. I mean, his family was aware, but I don't think they had any significant interest in pro wrestling. So he just he fell into obscurity following his departure from the business and his death. And I was able to unearth him and his accomplishments and presented that to Seth. They immediately responded to me and informed me that they were going to bestow their Trailblazer Award upon him. Mm-hmm. And his family members were able to go up to the Hall of Fame and receive that award on his behalf. So that, frankly, meant more to me than any individual honor that or nomination or whatever that I've received over the course of doing this. The fact that my work was having true influence is huge. And it's one thing I'm not the person who specializes in stuff. I don't have a publisher I have to go to where we're sitting around brainstorming, okay, what topic is going to sell the most books? I just approach this that, okay, you're probably not going to make any money with this, so just write about what's important to you, research it, write it, get it out there. I'm just thrilled that I researched and wrote about something that wound up leading to a forgotten figure being honored finally.
I was there. I was in the table right next to the dais, and his large extended family got up there, and many of them had amazing things to say and unbelievable recall about a person that a lot of people didn't know about. And they were so great and I got to talk to a couple of them individually, and it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. It really was. Congratulations on it because it kind of cements what you're doing in calling out and bringing out information about people who have been, well, forgotten. Is that the right word?
Yeah. I know I'm not dealing with the sexiest of topics. I'm not covering the many iterations of DX and 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 putting things out there that, "Oh, I remember that. That happened in my lifetime. Let me read this and see how much of it I remember or what happened behind the scenes that I was unaware of." And I know there's a market for that. There's a huge market for that stuff. But again, I approach this that you probably won't make any money, but what is the book that you wanted to read that no one has written or that unlikely that anyone will ever write? Well, that's the book I want to write, and that's what satisfies me. And again, I'm thrilled when one of my releases sells a single copy to someone who isn't a friend or family member. From then on, if somebody tells me, "Hey, I learned something and I have a newfound appreciation for this era of wrestling or this nation or this individual," that means the world to me, and that's all I care about.
You remind me of my favorite musician of all time. His name was Dominic Triano. Dominic did things his own way. He's a member of the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, but not many people in the US know who he is. But he always went by his own judgment. I want to do the music I want to do. He actually turned down gigs with Steely Dan, Edgar Winter, and Alice Cooper because he was doing his own thing and he wanted to continue doing what he was doing. He was his own man and he made great music. And again, nobody knows him. I take my cues from this guy because he was a cool guy on top of it. Do it for yourself first, and your enthusiasm and quality will sell it regardless of the obscurity people think it is in the beginning. Do you agree with that?
I do, because I think you tend to have your not your first responders, but your early adopters. You have the people who will buy any book about professional wrestling, no matter what it is, and then you have people who are really in the weeds with respect to, like, oh, I really do care about wrestling from 1900 to 1920, so let me grab that. And if you can offer something to the market that is of quality that's solid enough, then you'll it will appeal to those people and they'll make it known that, hey, I usually, because these are usually people who are fairly respected as far as connoisseurs of the material is concerned. They'll let other people know, I read this book, I really enjoyed it, I learned a lot from it. If you're serious about saying that you're a fan of this era or this material, then you need to get this book too. People like Greg Oliver have said they like my stuff. People like Dave Meltzer. The last book, I had Dave Meltzer, Greg Oliver, Tim Hornbaker, Brian Solomon, Keith Greenberg all reaching out to me saying, some version of thank you for writing this, or somebody needed to write this, and we really appreciate that you're doing this. That's a pretty solid list of folks who are taking an interest in what I'm doing. So that alone makes it worthwhile to me.
I have no doubt that that's as good as money, as far as I'm concerned. To have the respect of a list of names like that, we've all accomplished so much, right?
I agree.
Now let's move back onto your book here. I think, Mike Johnson, from right here in where I live in Queens, I believe.
I love Mike.
He's got a great jacket quote. He says, people who believe Scottish wrestling began with the emergence of Roddy Piper will really have their eyes open with this one. And as Mr. Magoo used to say, by George, you've done it again. Because your last two books kind of fulfilled that motto, and this is even more so. I've gotten through half of the book, and I will say this. Once you discover the names of these great legendary wrestlers like Donald Denny and Duncan Ross, and you keep reading and reading and reading, it starts to read like a current wrestling story.
Yeah.
They went through a lot of the same things that today's stars do, only worse. How do you feel about that?
I don't know how much of the book I want to spoil, but that's
exactly.
But that's okay. It's okay. And starting with the fact that they brought a lot of credibility to their wrestling, even though much of their wrestling, the majority of their wrestling wasn't on the level. And we like to look back on this era as, oh, this is the era where wrestling is real. And if you research the era for more than 15 minutes, you learn that it was anything but. These guys were legitimate professional athletes. They were paid very handsomely for specializing in athletics, going to local competitions, especially Highland Games competitions in their case, and winning almost all of the events. They could just travel from place to place, week to week, sweep a Highland Games event and live very comfortably if they just continued to stockpile those victories and those winnings. But they leveraged legitimate athleticism into a professional wrestling persona, which is what many people do nowadays. You're always looked upon more favorably if you come from a legitimate sporting endeavor. And in Duncan Ross's case, Duncan becomes so popular from his exploits on the Highland Games circuit and professional wrestling that he's able to piece together what was one of the most powerful early wrestling territories. He ties together what I think I referred to as the Lake Erie corridor from like Rochester and Buffalo down through Cleveland and to some extent up into Detroit. He pieces that together into a territory and crowns himself as the world wrestling champion. And then he moves from that into phony armored horseback combat where he's going out in full suits of armor. I mean, that strikes me as very much a McMahonian move. I've established myself in one faux combat endeavor, and now I'm going to see if I can bring my if my success in that endeavor will translate into something else. But in this case, what Ross was doing was similarly phony, but for a while, he made a lot of money doing the same sort of thing in competitive horseback combat, crowned himself as the broadsword champion of the world. So he claimed that he was the world wrestling champion, the world broadsword fighting champion, and the world athletic champion simultaneously. And then you get into the matter of the bets that were placed on almost all of these wrestling events and how the wrestlers would manipulate the results of these events and place bets through third parties in order to make far more money in the gambling parlors and houses than they were from the gates and the or from ticket sales and gate receipts. So which by the way is very much a prescient matter when you have in MMA especially talk of manipulating the results in order to make money by appealing to the gambling community. So yes, a long-winded response, but you have quite a lot that was going on back then that is very much reflected in what's happening in wrestling and the sports landscape today.
It really is, and I was flabbergasted when I read the earlier parts of the book where, even the title Highland Games and Hippodromes, the phrase hippodrome meant something else, didn't it, other than a place where people gathered?
Yeah, a hippodrome refers to a sporting competition with a predetermined result, and it extends beyond combat sports like wrestling and boxing, although that's where it became most famous. But for example, Duncan Ross, you have him engaging in competitive walking events, 24-hour walking tournaments where they wanted to see who could cover the most ground walking in a 24-hour period. They were putting up money to see who they could bring in to compete with him in these events. The majority of these were probably legitimate, but I wouldn't be surprised if a few of those were phony as well.
What's really cool about this book, just like your other books, if I kind of came up with a synopsis for how you write, and I wrote it down, and it says, "This book, like your other books, it's not a year-by-year listing of names and titles, but it's a gradual unfolding of an era that, once again, you've taken the time to reveal for an eager and in some cases, unsuspecting audience. That's the way I look at your work.
Oh, you're not wrong. That's the goal. I've listened to your interview with Brian Solomon. Brian Solomon interviewed me. I really like Brian. He's
Oh, Brian's the
he's a
best.
terribly nice guy.
Yes,
Um,
I'm happy to say, and he wouldn't argue, we've gotten together socially 2 or 3 times at this point. So it's like, yeah, meeting him has been kind of a revelation for me, and I'm proud of him for keeping the PWI lineage going, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian and I have totally different approaches to the subject matter, but that difference in my case is sort of born out of necessity because I wanted to cover Scottish pro wrestling in the US. I had no idea how I was going to approach it. And I know Brian's approach is closer to figure everything out, map it out before you write the first thing. Mine was much closer to figure out who the key figures are, who like get the timeline down, figure out who it's essential to cover and go from there. Early on, okay, I need to cover Donald Dinny, Duncan Ross. I figured out as I was progressing, okay, I need to cover Duncan McMillan and Dan McLeod as well. But I started writing about Duncan Ross before I started writing about anybody else. He was an essential figure, and I know I'm going to include him. So let me write my own personal summary of everything that he's up to. And as things unfolded, you have certain names that get repeated. And you're like, oh, that's this person too? Okay, that's weird. So for example, you're covering Donald Dinny, and Donald Dinny is part of a major hippodroming scandal in the Northwestern United States that leads to him being forced into more or less into wrestling exile in Australia. He's forced to leave the country in shame. Well, his hippodroming partner is Duncan McMillan. Okay, who is Duncan McMillan? Duncan McMillan is a fellow Highland Games competitor who was cleaning up on the West Coast until Donald Dinny shows up. And then the two of them are participating in both Highland Games events and they're wrestling each other in predetermined competitions. Well, Donald Dinny goes into exile in Australia. Shortly after Donald Dinny leaves, Duncan Ross shows up on the West Coast as a guest of the Scottish Thistle Club, and he starts participating in fake Highland Games events that are crediting him with establishing new world records at some of the throwing and tossing events. Who's right next to him helping to legitimize some of these marks? They sort of mention offhand, oh yeah, Duncan McMillan was also participating in these competitions. Well, that's very interesting. So then I moved to Dan McLeod, the little Scot, who eventually has multiple reigns with the American Heavyweight Championship, although back then it was also referred to as the World Heavyweight Championship in North America. He's being invited to wrestle Farmer Burns for the championship. And it just so happens that Duncan McMillan is the promoter of the event, only he's operating in Iowa and Illinois at this point. So I'm like, wait a minute. So now I have to backtrack through everything Duncan McMillan's doing. And I discover that McMillan was the partner of Evan. He made his way out to the Midwest. He became the partner of Evan the Strangler Lewis before Evan Lewis wins the world championship, sticks with Lewis the entire time, and then becomes a partner of Farmer Burns and seemingly helps to coordinate the transition of the world title from Evan Lewis to Farmer Burns. As I'm studying all of these figures, I was fortunate that I was able to cobble together a cohesive narrative and piece all of this together and connect all of these Scottish figures in ways that made narrative sense.
Folks, does it remind you of the backstage machinations of AEW and WWE in a way? You know what I'm saying? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Only then, I think they kept these things under wraps a little bit better than they would today, I would think.
Well, see, Bob, it gets worse because I'll spoil something else for you. A lot of people who've studied the era know Frank Gotch told 6 to 8 different versions of this story, that he was at a picnic in Iowa when a guy showed up and There are different, again, 6 different variations of the story. The most popular one is he was the local sports hero, and he was at this event where there were a lot of athletic competitions being held, and this guy who's there, this little guy, is cleaning up in all of the events except the sprints. And Gotch is just getting furious because he doesn't know this guy. He doesn't know where he came from, but he's besting him in all the events that he usually wins. So he challenges this guy to wrestle right there in the middle of the street. And this guy beats it. Gotch is stunned. He has no idea how it happened. He has no idea that this little guy just happens to also be one of the best wrestlers on the planet. On his way out of town, the guy hands Gotch a card that says, Dan McLeod, World Wrestling Champion. That's one version of the story. There's the version where someone tips him off that it's McLeod and he decided to challenge him anyway and lost. There's the version of the story where McLeod never revealed his identity during the event, but was so impressed by Gotch that he goes by Gotch's house and hands the card to Gotch's father, which leads to Gotch's recruitment. Well, whose camp was Gotch recruited into? Gotch was recruited into the camp of Duncan McMillan and Farmer Burns. Burns and McMillan were traveling in a 3-man unit with Halil Adali, the second of the Terrible Turks. They had a falling out with Adali in Colorado and sort of left him there. And when they returned to the Midwest, Gotch is suddenly brought in as the third man of their trio, and that's when they start promoting him as the next big thing in heavyweight wrestling. And so, as it turns out, it was Dan McLeod who discovers Frank Gotch and hands him over to Burns and McMillan to be groomed into being a world champion. So that's why I say that there's the Scottish DNA that's all over the wrestling of the era. You not only have the true athletes that legitimized wrestling in several parts of the country through their participation in Highland Games and the wrestling events at Highland Games, they help to groom the guy who then goes on to help Lewis and Burns establish, 2 heavyweight champions, establish wrestling in the Midwest. And then another guy who's from the Scottish Thistle Club in San Francisco, Dan McLeod, goes out to the Midwest, defeats Burns for the title, but then also recruits Frank Gotch into the camp of McMillan and Burns, and he becomes the biggest star of the entire era. So yes, you have Scottish fingerprints all over this thing.
And folks, he just rattled this off from the top of his head. I don't see any notes here, so it's like you're a remarkable journalist. He just showed his hands.
But
There
I'm
he
not,
goes.
I'm not looking at it.
No, he's not. His book is sitting next to him, but it is closed. So well done. If that ain't going to sell product, I don't know what is it. That's terrific. How can I ask a dumb fan question? How's your relationship with Drew McIntyre? Did that inspire you to write this? Was he keen on it? How did that all come about?
So we had 2 different things going on. What inspired me to write this is my father and his entire side of the family are of Scottish descent. On that side of my family, we are descended from a soldier who was a prisoner of war in the Battle of Dunbar in 1650, brought over to the U.S. as an indentured servant and put to work in the Saugus Iron Works near Boston for a 7-year period. His name was Alistair McDougall. During that period of time, during the period of his indentured servitude, he had his name changed to Alexander Douglas. That's where Douglas as my last name comes from. On my father's side of the family, you have some very proud Scottish roots. If you've seen photos of me wearing a tie that have been taken in the last 10 to 15 years or so, in all likelihood, I'm wearing a tartan tie. That's just how I was raised in the family. You wear your tartan. That's the whole Scottish angle to it. You see me sitting here in a Roddy Piper t-shirt. Because of those roots, if I learned that a wrestler was of Scottish descent, I supported them no matter what, or if they at least claim Scottish descent. I supported them no matter what. So, of course, to the extent that I'm a modern wrestling fan, I was a big fan of Drew McIntyre when he showed up. And I became a huge fan of Drew McIntyre when he returned to WWE, and he was far more dominant during his return run.
Yeah, night and day. Night and day.
Yeah, so I made Drew's acquaintance because when we were preparing to release Steve Kern's second book, which you were very kind to, by the way, in your review of what you believe to be the best pro wrestling books of all time, and I appreciate that. I was certainly listening. We were talking about who he thought who might contribute a solid forward to the book, and he was going through the list of people he had a hand in training, and one of them was Drew McIntyre. He texted Drew. Drew texted right back and said he would love to contribute the forward. And so I spoke to Drew on the phone a couple of times. I told him straight out of the gate, of anyone who's wrestling right now that I'm a fan of, it's you, because you're Scottish and because I have this inclination to support Scottish things, which he appreciated. And we stayed in touch, although a lot of that is me texting him whenever WWE releases a piece of merchandise. And I'll say, do you really own this? Like, do you actually wear this at home? And he said, like, do you wear your own merch at home? And he said, no, because I'm not a loser. And I'll say, well, and, and I'll say,
Oh,
and I'll say, well, what about, I'll screenshot the Drew McIntyre slippers, and I'll say, well, what about these? Do you wear these when you step out of the shower? And he said, I don't even own those. But yeah, Drew and I are cool. And when I reached out to him and told him what I was working on and asked if he would write the forward, he said, oh, definitely. So I'm thrilled to have him involved in this.
now am I guessing right? Now my spider sense is tingling. Was I guessing right when the last thing to go into the book was that forward because it was after he won the world title?
Sort of. No, I actually asked him months ago. And it was a matter of, he wrote an initial version. It was a matter of getting it cleared and approved. And so he was saying, okay, I want to take another look at it. I want to take another look at it. I want to make sure it's okay. And I got a hold of him again the evening after he won the championship. And he said, yeah, it's fine. We'll roll with that. And I said, okay, perfect. So that's why it was the last thing that went into the book, is I wanted to make sure that it was approved even before I started distributing advanced copies, because I didn't want there to be a version that was very different from what met with his final approval.
I see. Okay. That's the cynical wrestling person in me saying, oh, let's hold off on this until, he gets the belt and he can put that in the forward, which it is, but it had nothing to do with it.
Oh, in fact, you know me, I don't really watch wrestling, but I was on Twitter. A lot of people were saying, oh, Drew McIntyre's wrestling for the title in Europe. He better win. He better win. He better win. And I just sent him a message that said, hey, you have a lot of support on Twitter from people saying that they really hope you win. So for your sake, I hope you win. That was 2 days before the title change, and he didn't respond to that at all. He didn't he didn't reply until the day after.
There you go. Man, it's cool stuff. This is exciting to me once again. As you know, I have a stack of your books, and because your books are so, let's put it this way, you don't write short books. One stack of your books is a, your requirement for, fiber in a month. So that's really cool.
I want to give people their money's worth.
I think you write to the length it needs to be, as opposed to writing just to write a long book. There's no question in my mind about that. Like, this one's got more pages. Whoever says that about a book, I think it's mainly you need that amount of room to get that information in.
Yeah, but I'm also, admittedly, I'm sensitive to complaints about other wrestling books. I see when a book gets released and it's 160 pages long and they're charging $25 for it, and it's from somebody who should know better, that I know it's their autobiography, and I know they've had a 20 to 30 year pro wrestling career. I've worked on enough autobiographies by this point where the core of Brian Blair's pro wrestling career was 10 or so years, and we got 400 plus pages out of it. It all felt like it was necessary material. So I know that someone who had a 20 to 30 year pro wrestling career, that they're cheating the readers to some degree if they're limiting the work to 160 pages. Let's just say that. Because I'm sensitive to that, with the mindset, admittedly, I'll approach a topic thinking, you know what, if this is shy of 300 pages, I may be shortchanging them, or I need to consider the pricing on this to make sure it's priced in a way where they're not going to be upset with me later on. Fair?
Smart, canny, yeah.
Okay.
I'm all for that. That makes sense to me. Sure. As Mr. Magoo would say, "By George, you've done it again." This is another. Was it by George you've done some? Oh, Magoo, you've done it again. That's what he used to say. Excuse me. But anyway, I think that I'm sorry. I just watched Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol for no reason at all. I missed it during the Christmas season.
Oh, you watched it for a reason.
No, I watched it. No, listen, I'm very emotional about that show. I mean, literally emotional. It's the first thing I remember at the age of 3 or 4 ever seeing on television. Ever.
That
Ever,
that
ever. I
that's why
was
you
around when
watched
it was new, around 1963 or something like that,
it. Mhm.
and that's why I watch it. It takes me right back, and I get all goosey because it's
Yeah.
like, it's like the wonderful memory of Christmas being bigger than you, bigger than the world, you know?
Transports you back.
Exactly right, and that's why I'm so nostalgic even about old wrestling and stuff like that, and you obviously are too.
Mhm.
Do you find that well, you just got done saying that today's stuff is kinda not your bag. I'm kind of in the same way, but I still watch it out of this oddball sense of duty, right? Because I used to have to watch it. It was my job, and ever since then, I always keep an eye on it, and I see things I love about it, and I see things I hate about it at the same time, but I keep my mouth shut about it because you know what? It's for a different audience now,
Yeah.
and you agree
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah, I do, and that's one of the reasons why the 4 books that I mean, call them the Ian Douglas indie collection or whatever you wanna call them, that weren't co-authored works, that were rooted entirely in my personal interest in wrestling, where I'm talking about pro wrestling in the Bahamas. Well, no footage of that stuff exists, or we're following around the original Rufus Jones and Jack Claiborne, or we're delving into the black pro wrestling stars that were on display prior to the 1950s, or we're dealing with Donald Dinny, Duncan Ross, Duncan McMillan, and Dan McLeod from 1870 to 1905. No one has footage of this stuff. No one could have footage of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why it's so interesting to me, because I want to go back and get a sense of what that must have looked like and felt like. Just being able to imagine that is far more interesting to me now than anything that they could project through a television screen today.
Which leads me to a question about the photographs and illustrations that are in the book, which, by the way, look better than ever. They really look good, these illustrations. But the question is this: was a lot of that hard to find, and did much of it fall into the public domain because of how old it was?
All of it, all of it
All of it,
falls
not
into
some of it, all of it. Okay.
all of it falls into public domain, absolutely, and it wasn't particularly hard to find because these guys were so prolific. If you start researching pro wrestling from that era, the big names, Duncan Ross might have beaten Colonel McLaughlin in Cleveland, but they were covering that as far away as San Francisco or Los Angeles or in Florida, some of which are places where Duncan Ross traveled and wrestled. Their names had a significant amount of resonance with the readers of the sports pages back then, and their photos were printed all over the country. So in most cases, it wasn't very hard to find some clear images of these guys. The one image, since somebody probably has a clear image of this, the one image that I really regret couldn't have been clearer. Later in the book, there's an image of Dan McLeod and Paul Ponds, 5'5" maybe, and Paul Ponds is 6'8", and they're side by side.
Mhm.
And I really wish that was clearer so you can see the height disparity between them, especially considering how McLeod Probably in what was, for the most part, a legitimate fashion, embarrassed Paul Pons on the mat to the extent that Pons never returned to wrestle in the French-speaking part of Canada ever again.
I just wonder how fans reacted back then. Did they go, "Oh, that's it for him? If he can't beat him, what's the point?" You know what I'm saying? Because of the size disparity.
Well, exactly, and McLeod was, I believe at the time, he was either the reigning heavyweight champion or he just lost the championship to Jenkins, but McLeod had a habit of supplementing his income by showing up at wrestling events in places where he'd never wrestled before and wrestling under a pseudonym. The match with Pons was one of those cases where almost everything was best of five falls back then. Or it was, let's see how much bigger this guy is than this guy. He needs to beat him 5 times in an hour in order to claim victory. Well, against Pons, the deal was something like that, and McLeod didn't lose a single time. The reason this strikes me as one of those cases where Pons got double crossed but actually didn't realize he was wrestling against Dan McLeod is because you start to notice patterns as you're reviewing these things. It could be McLeod against Jenkins in Cleveland. Jenkins has to pin Dan McLeod 3 times in an hour. He only pinned him twice. So Jenkins gets to say he pinned McLeod twice. McLeod gets to say he didn't lose the match. In the case of Pons and McLeod, Pons has to pin McLeod, who he's more than a foot taller than. He has to beat him 5 or 6 times in an hour, something like that. He not only fails to pin him a single time, but McLeod is taking him down repeatedly toward the end of the bout. That strikes me as a case where McLeod went into business for himself. Pons got exposed, and then McLeod had to serve time in jail after that because McLeod and one of his backers convinced somebody that he was likely to lose to Pons outright and then refused to even be pinned once.
See, this is why I love your books, is because anybody can put out a record book, title lineages. You get into the nitty-gritty of these mini controversies that sound like they could happen 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And it kind of opens up, like I said, the perspective of, the use of the word hippodrome as predetermined, basically, or, not quite on the level. I didn't
Mhm.
think it went back that far. I really didn't. I had no inkling that such a term would go back that far.
Yeah, it was
You
it
think
was in common usage, yeah.
in the United States, the way we're trained to know our wrestling history, you would think that goes back to, Jack Pfeffer or that era of 40s and the 50s type of thing, where it was all legit until. I think the truth of the matter is more, it goes back way farther than we give it credit for. You kind of expose that in this book.
Oh, yeah. There was one editorial that was written where a wrestler came into town, I think it was Kentucky, and they pulled him off the train, and he explained the whole deal to this reporter as long as his name wasn't used. And he said, yeah, the wrestlers will go into town. One will submit an open challenge through the newspaper, and then the other one will come in and they'll trade insults and barbs through the sports pages to build up interest in the match. And then they'll hold the bout, and the result is predetermined. And maybe they'll hold a rematch, maybe they won't, but then they'll move on to the next town. Yeah, the business had been exposed, but, then you find instances, I think it no, not Montana. I think it was a town in Wisconsin where they'd been shafted. It's wherever what they refer to as the Greek George incident. They mentioned that, for a few years after the Greek George incident, you weren't even allowed to say the word wrestling in the street for fear of being murdered. But for some reason, they're welcoming the wrestlers back. It seems to me that the people of this town rather prefer to be hippodromed.
Fascinating stuff. It really is. Once
Mhm.
again, with every book you write, you open my eyes to stuff I had no inkling about. And that's why I
Yeah.
think you're doing a great public service to the wrestling fans out there in that if you really, really want to know your history, I think it's imperative for authors like you to kind of reveal segments of the wrestling world that some people probably don't even know existed at all, to be honest with you.
I tricked myself into writing this book. I always thought, wow, it would be really interesting if somebody would write a book about the Turkish invasion in wrestling. I think it would be really interested if somebody delved more into Farmer Burns or Evan Lewis. But I'm going to focus on the Scottish wrestlers who came over to the US, or their families came to the US, and they were raised in immigrant households. And lo and behold, just by following the natural progression of events here, I was forced to cover Evan Lewis, Farmer Burns, and the Turkish invasion of wrestling. So I got what I deserved.
Another thing I really loved about this book in particular was your newspaper accounts of people who would, I guess, for lack of a better term, review the matches that they saw, the events that they saw.
Mhm.
And did you ever find, I have a feeling your answer is going to be yes to this, but I want to ask you this. Did you find two accounts of the same encounter between two wrestlers that didn't really jibe with each other? Was one looking at it from one perspective and one from another?
Yes, and I can give you a great example of that. There was a Duncan Ross match in Philadelphia where back in Cleveland, it was reported. I mean, by then, Cleveland had soured on Ross. They reported Duncan Ross embarrassed himself. This event was a clear hippodrome from start to finish, and Duncan Ross needs to retire from wrestling. They were reprinting an account from a Philadelphia paper. And it was more so, see, this is more confirmation that Duncan Ross is who we thought he was. And then there's an account from another Philadelphia paper that says, yes, the rival publication said that this was a hippodrome from start to finish, but we see it differently. And the reason we see it differently isn't because Duncan Ross is this honest wrestler of great repute. It's because the gentleman he was wrestling against has a solid reputation in this town. And so to answer your question, yes, but you also learn that the papers were excellent at taking sides. You had Buffalo newspapers who absolutely hated Dan McLeod and loved Tom Jenkins during the period of time where they were having their rivalry, and vice versa. You had papers in Cleveland. You'd have papers that would drool all over Duncan Ross and everything he did, essentially whitewashing him, saying that he's a tremendous credit to the community, and he's actually helped to stamp out hippodroming in our midst through his presence, when it's clear that nothing he was doing was on the low.
It just goes to show you the New York Post versus New York Daily News. It didn't start with those two. It was going on for into
Right.
the late 1800s, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, you've done it again. This is a tremendous effort. People are going to like this one because you know what? I think people will start to read this because of the interestingness of the things we've discussed here, like
Mhm.
the phrase hippodrome, how certain wrestlers were conducting themselves. You'll forget the time period and get into the histories because there was a lot of controversy, a lot of juice. It wasn't just he bested this guy by using such and such a hold. There was a lot going on around the periphery of what the matches were. And it
Oh, yeah.
kind of mirrors today, really.
You get into Dan McLeod title defenses in San Francisco, where in the follow-up to the match report, they'll say, by the way, there was a guy who happened to roll into the betting parlor. For some reason, he nailed every single bet, which was impossible. Somehow he knew that the first fall would be decided in less than 30 seconds. Somehow he knew the second fall would take more than an hour. And how could you know that a wrestler could get so thoroughly destroyed in the first round and then suddenly have the stamina and the reserve to last an hour in the second fall? So it's clear that you had people who had inside knowledge of everything that was going on, and they were scooping the gambling houses.
But yet, fans still came out. I mean, the newspapers were printing this and that about what they were suspecting, yet you put crowd tallies in some places that are kinda eye-opening. People seem to enjoy what they were looking at for the most part.
Yeah, and they were also sensitive to the fact that they wanted to see I mean, if you wanna go ahead and call them a baby faces and heels, because in certain towns they were. The title change between the second title change of Jenkins and McLeod, when McLeod wins the championship back from Jenkins. They made sure to do it in a town other than Cleveland, but the papers sort of hint that Jenkins used to attract 1,500 to 2,000 fans regularly to some of the auditoriums in Cleveland, but by that point, he's the world champion and he's lucky to get 600 to show up to the same venues. But fans were still calling the newspapers asking what were the times of the falls without asking who won, because they knew that Jenkins couldn't lose. But there was no longer any interest in seeing it personally because there was no fear that Jenkins might actually lose. So the second title change, with McLeod defeating Jenkins under controversial circumstances, seems to have occurred in order to help spike attendance in Cleveland yet again, because Jenkins had run it into the ground due to his dominance.
I'm listening to you just recall all this stuff, and I'm like, it's fascinating. It really
You're
is.
like
It's
you're like, "Yeah,
because
that's the Sheik in Detroit in
the Sheik in
1970."
Detroit, I didn't wanna say that. I didn't wanna say that because you know what a
Mhm,
mark I am for the Sheik, but yep, very, very similar. By the way, I attended an event I think you would have been happy with. You know the Alec Reckon, the Busted Open podcast?
mhm,
Also, he does that Pro Wrestling Nation thing that they do. The very first Hall of Famers, they're having a Pro Wrestling Nation Hall of Fame. Bill Apter calls me because, "I'm coming to New York. Will you come and join me?" I said, "Will I?"
mhm.
I said, "Why? You wanna get dinner?" He said, "No, let's I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Me, George Napolitano, and Keith Elliott Greenberg are the very
Mhm.
first inductees into that Hall of Fame before wrestlers and everything else." And I thought you would, if you hadn't known that, you would get a kick out of learning that that was their choice of all people to be their first Hall of Famer.
Oh, that's fantastic because, first of all, they deserve it. I've actually met Bill down in Florida,
Mhm.
at one of the Florida Fan Fest events. First of all, they deserve it, and it's nice to see historians getting their just desserts,
Yeah.
because people are gonna hate me for saying this, so don't amplify this too far, but in a lot of ways, the research and the writing about wrestling is is realer than the wrestling itself.
I understand that. I was in the business. You know who I work for, right? I mean, that's a
I
perfect way of
do.
putting it. It's a perfect way of
Mhm.
putting it, you know?
Mhm.
Actually,
Yeah.
probably a little bit too kind way of putting it. But hey, listen, when I was growing up, I started really getting into wrestling in 1970. I'm so old. And I used to love the agate pages in the old Ring Wrestling and Wrestling Review, where it was just match results from all over the world, all over the country, and in great detail. That was why I was buying the magazines. It really wasn't for the front of the book. It's the same reason you buy a newspaper, open it to the back to read the agate box scores as opposed to the articles about the games themselves.
Mhm.
And to me, it was kinda like you're getting an insider's look at what happened in Cleveland, what happened in Hawaii, what happened whatever the place it was, and that's what got me into wrestling magazine. It wasn't, the forever heartbreak of Tito Santana and articles like that. No, it was it was the meat and potatoes of who was winning, who was losing, and who are these people.
The first time I ever opened a wrestling magazine, and I didn't own many, but I certainly remember the first time I did, and here's the Southern Report, here's the Western Report, and they're
Right,
talking
yeah.
about the territorial system, and I didn't know wrestling territories existed, so
Mhm.
imagine my shock at reading about all of these wrestlers that I'd never heard of before, and then yeah, I appreciated it because later on when they popped up on the screen in WWF
Right.
syndicated programming, or they popped
Mhm.
up in WCW, I had at least some familiarity with who they were, so I credit the wrestling magazines for that.
Absolutely, and, Going into the '70s was the same for me. I would buy the wrestling magazines. We didn't even have wrestling on TV for 2 years. I kept buying the magazines. But let's say if Ivan Koloff came back and I had never seen him before, I read about him in the wrestling magazines, or Waldo Von Erich, or
Mhm.
Nikolai Volkov, people like that, people who were just showing up. At least I had an inkling as to who they were. I didn't go in cold going, "Who is this guy?" And I used to
Mhm.
enjoy that. I go, "Oh, I know who that is." So it gave you a familiarity you wouldn't have had any other way. And to me, the
Absolutely.
greatest affirmation of what I used to do for a living came from Bruno Sammartino at his Hall of Fame speech at MSG. And he said, "If it wasn't for the wrestling magazines, I wouldn't have been a worldwide star. That was the only way to get word out to other countries and other fan bases of who I was." When I went to Indianapolis and worked with Dick the Bruiser, that's how people knew who I was. They wouldn't have known me otherwise. So
Mhm.
I go back to the very, very last years of that when I was with the magazines, because I left in like 95. Then you had the influx of cable TV and the sheets and all this other stuff. And, the digital world was encroaching at that point. So I really had the last vestige of that influence in what I was writing about before everything had opened up and it was common knowledge at the press of a button. And I feel really blessed to have been a part of the tail end of that era. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I really do.
Oh, it certainly does because it helps to shape the way you approach the business, and a lot of people just don't have that familiarity. I mean, well, a lot of people hate when I use the example, but he and I get along very well. But and I think you'll agree with the analogy here or the use of his name. Like Dave Meltzer,
Okay.
for example. Dave Meltzer, to use the phrase, he sort of got it out of the mud. He started a newsletter way back in the day and watched it grow during the true dirt sheet era. And he grew his business into what it is today. There are people who didn't see that happen, who don't necessarily have an appreciation for the effort it took for him to build his name during an era where there was no internet. They'll pop up now and say, wait a second, why does that guy's opinion matter so much? Or you have wrestlers, and I mean, there's a little more credibility to this, who say, wait a minute, I was a part of the business and now I'm starting a podcast or I'm starting a network. And this guy was never a part of the business. How come he gets to have this huge following that's on the same level as mine or larger than mine? It's because he worked very hard for a long time to grow his business,
Well,
as a writer, and if all you have is this microwave impression of what wrestling media is, that you can just snap your fingers and start a podcast, and suddenly your opinion is of the same value as this guy's, or you can quickly build an audience on the same level as this guy who's been doing it for 50 years now.
legit, yeah.
Um, yeah, Meltzer's been at it for 50 years. He first gained national prominence 40 something years ago, but he's been at it for 50 years. The fact that you started that early, it's one of the reasons why you're so knowledgeable and you have the fans that you have, because you're able to speak with such authority on things that happened before wrestling was available worldwide at the push of a button.
Well, I'll go back to Dave here. I,
Mhm.
I hold him in absolutely no ill will, and no one else should either. And here's my reasons why. Back when I was with PWI, we get the Observer in every Monday, and somebody would go to the copying machine and make 12 copies of it, and they'd pass it to all of our staffers because everybody wanted to read it. We got tired of fighting over it, so we made multiple copies. Even if it was 32, pages, we would copy it. We knew it was eating into our business back then. We didn't care. Why?
Mhm.
Dave Meltzer was, is, and always will be a first-rate reporter, and there is a difference between a reporter and someone who gives their opinion. Dave happens to do both, and he's held
Mhm.
in lower esteem because of his opinions, while people ignore his vast reporting past. And I say it's two different things. People can't tell an editorial from a news program now. It's all blended together in people's minds. I say he's Hall of Famer 50 times over for what he's done for the wrestling business. "Oh, he exposed the business," they were saying in my day. I never agreed with it. He was expanding the fan base. It was a
Yeah.
different type of fan that was coming in, but it was still more fans. At a time, particularly 91, 92, when things were shaky with all those scandals, wrestling really needed it.
Yeah.
And in a way, he helped clean up the business by reporting what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
So, I don't care if he, somebody throws, Boston cream pies at him on his video podcast. I don't care. He has earned his stripes. I will never have anything but the highest regard for him, and if people don't wanna agree with me, they don't have to. I started as a cub reporter for my hometown newspaper, worked my way up the ranks, and I know how hard it is to get facts straight and get them out with accuracy. And Dave Meltzer, nobody ever did it better. I'll leave it
And
at that.
and he was and he th yes, and he was a legitimate reporter. I've seen him covering high school sports for newspapers in Texas. Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
he actually got out there and covered and reported on other sports aside from wrestling. So, yeah, he's every bit a real traditional reporter who just happened to become so successful covering wrestling that he was able to transition full time to that.
And, you know what? He can say what he wants about it, "Oh, 4-star matches fire." I don't care. I don't listen.
Yeah, he
I
can
have my
have
own
whatever
opinions on
opinion he wants.
matches, you know? Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Form your own opinion. Don't be led around by the nose in anything in life. Let's be, s let's be straight about that. I mean, you watched the match, you either liked it or didn't. I've hated matches that people loved that he gave 5 stars to, because I thought
Mhm.
in some cases the wrestlers were overworking and coming close to injuring each other, those kind of matches. Those things still bother me, you
Or
know?
actually injuring each other.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
So, when he's kind of saying that's cool, I will never say that's cool.
Mhm.
You're supposed to look like you're killing each other, not killing each other.
Yes.
That's wrestling. That's work. Work the crowd. The phrase "work" has been bastardized over all these many decades. It's work the crowd. You're working them. You're working them to a lather. Work is not jumping off a basketball hoop on a high school gym floor. That's not work. Am
Or
I right or
or
wrong? I mean, that's just
oh
the way I always looked at it.
oh, yeah. Well, work
I don't
rate
even like
now
that
means
term.
it now means so many things now. Like, oh,
Mhm.
you took a rest hold. Well, that's a mark against the rating. Well, wait a second. Like back then, because what they do now is complete the match structure, and what they do now is completely different from what they did back then. It was, we're going to start off the match. We're going to listen to the crowd. We're going to get a feel for them. We're going to work them into a frenzy. However, we have to do it. We're going to get them into the match, and that's what work was. They were figuring things out as they went along, usually with nothing other than their finish, and figuring out how to best appeal to the audience while incorporating the wishes of the booker and the promoter into what they were doing, and also not stepping on the toes of the main eventers.
Right.
As opposed to now going to the ring with the entire match laid out, and whatever, however the audience responds to it, it doesn't matter, because we're trying to incorporate as much movement into this, because we want to appeal to the millions of people watching on television around the world, and we want this to get a lot of replay on YouTube or however it's
Right.
clipped for the internet.
Right. Right. I'll leave you with this, and this has
Mhm.
bothered me for a long time. I've talked about this with other guests on the show. The problem with today's wrestling is, and again, it doesn't really have a problem because they're printing money. But here's the deal: the indies used to take their cues from the majors. We want to look like them. Today, I think the majors are taking their cues from the indies, and I think that's the wrong way to look at things. In other words, oh, this guy can do a triple aerial moonsault onto a table that's got peanut butter all over it. Oh, we're gonna have to sign him. Right? And I think that that's the wrong mindset. Because it got a pop in front of 17 people in Dubuque doesn't mean it should be on a major league stage. because it's too dangerous. And there's another thing. I just think they work too hard and they take too many risks. I think wrestlers are great athletes. I know you agree with me on that. And I think,
Mhm.
talk to, guys like Steve Kern and stuff. I'm sure they would agree with what I'm saying. It's like, what are you doing to your bodies? You're going to get old and you're going to limp.
Oh, Steve Kern, Mike Rotunda,
Mhm.
Brian Blair. Like I've seen Brian limping around.
Yeah.
He won't mind me saying that. Mike, a year after I met Mike Rotunda, he needed to have hip surgery. He had a serious neck injury back in the 90s, right before he went over to WCW. Yeah, and those guys look at what's happening now, and they can't fathom administering those moves, being on the receiving ends of those moves, because they just think about how they were attempting to limit the amount of damage they took as they were wrestling 5, 6, 7 times a week to make all of their engagements because they didn't want to get injured and go without pay. And
Yeah.
yeah, and again, they still deal with this accumulation of damage from moves that were far less risky.
Yeah.
And I imagine they're horrified watching what the guys and girls are doing these days.
Well, there's a healthy thing going on right now. I don't know if you look at wrestling media like I do, but you have guys like William Regal speaking out, Jeff Hardy speaking out, videos with Maven and Stevie Richards going, they're looking at these dangerous moves, both in the indies and the majors. They're going, oh, how could you do this? There's a bubbling up now amongst
Mhm,
the wrestling intelligentsia, so to speak, that is echoing what I've been saying here for 5 years or 4 years or whatever it's been, in that there's gotta be a limit to this. There's other ways to tell stories, as they say. I don't even like the name storyline. In the old
mhm,
days, you could start a feud with one moment during a first match against 2 competitors, and then you could milk that for months. You didn't need 6 weeks of yelling at each other in the ring to get it accomplished. So,
yeah,
all I know is that I wish, if today's wrestling would do one thing, especially WWE, go into the vault, open up your tape collection for your younger wrestlers, and let them watch whatever they feel like watching. And take your cues from people who managed to live to 60, 70, 80 years old afterwards and still had great careers and could still walk after all that time. Because we're gonna,
mhm.
I'm really afraid. AEW, particularly, these guys are really, really doing risky stuff, man. They really are.
Ah, yeah, when you see guys taking belly to belly suplexes onto the steps,
Yeah.
and yeah, and even the audience is horrified at the risk involved in that. Like, yeah,
I would hope they
it's
are, but
it's so uncomfortable. Mhm.
I would certainly hope they would be. But there is a new breed of fan who wants that. I saw a quote from a wrestling fan on Facebook. He said, "Man, that was a good heart. These guys almost killed each other. That's what I want to buy a ticket to see. That homogenized WWF stuff." And I'm like, dude, seriously.
Yeah, there are boxing fans, and then there are the people who go on YouTube and just type in "best knockouts" and just wanna watch who just wanna watch the knockout montage.
Mhm.
And to me, that's the difference. Like, there are people who want to watch wrestling matches progress, and then there are people who just want to see collections of moves. And, to me, those are very different types of wrestling fans.
And very different types of organizational thought that goes behind that. You're
Mhm,
absolutely right.
mhm.
And we'll leave it at that, because I think I've held you here long enough. The book, Highland Games and Hippodromes, Scottish Identity and Influence at the Dawn of the American Pro Wrestling Industry. You've done it again, like Magoo says. You're a
I hope I
tremendous
have.
you're a tremendous talent. I look forward to not only every new book you have, but talking to you about it every time you release one. It's an honor and privilege for me to do it, and I hope you sell a gazillion books, and I hope your fan base grows and grows, because you are already a legendary wrestling book writer. You really are.
Stop,
No, you
stop,
are.
stop.
You are.
No, no, no,
Let's
no.
put it
Well,
this
look,
way:
hey,
the smart folk know who's a good writer. We'll put it that way.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to reading your book when you finally
Well, it's essentially
release it
done.
too.
It's essentially
Mhm,
done, and now I am into just the formatting stages at this point, and
mhm.
I hope this will please you. I think it's gonna hit about the 300-page mark, so it's not gonna be like a little mini thing.
Beautiful.
Because my life has so many different chapters in it that it's a tale of a exceptionally lucky person, to be honest with you, but it's not all about me. It's interspliced. We go back and forth just like my podcast does. Here's some memories, and I will give memories of wrestling cards that
Mhm.
nobody remembers, but I do. Anybody can recant WrestleMania 3, but I can tell you what happened in 1977 at the Washington Avenue Armory from the opening match to the back, and I remember all of it. So I'm hoping that the difference here will attract readers. And, I talk about writing the first 2 PWIs, my years on the road as a musician, my life story, but
Mhm.
with enough wrestling mixed in there that it doesn't become like a, "Here, look what I did, ma," type of thing. So I'm hoping people enjoy it.
I was told that as long as if you write about what's important to you, you write about it with passion, that
Yeah,
there will be an audience for it.
I think so, and it's delivered with the same upbeat, hopeful visage that really is me.
Mhm.
It's like in a world that's increasingly bitter and strange, I wanna be the antidote to that. And I'm
Oh,
hoping that my podcast is, and I'm hoping that this book will be. So, and the
authentic
working title is "Beaten by the Pulp."
beaten by the pulp.
Beaten by the Pulp. Yes, get it? Pulp magazines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That basically that title really refers to the moment I never saw coming when they sold the company and I had to leave. I didn't quit. I didn't get fired. I had to go. And
Mhm.
to me, that was. I thought my whole life was going to be a PWI, to be honest with you. And I couldn't move it. It was the early '90s. There was no internet, no phone. You had to be there, and I wasn't gonna move to rural Pennsylvania because I just bought property. I was stuck, so I had to go get another
Yeah.
job. It broke my heart. And is that a bad thing? No, because I bounced back and ended up working for other wrestling organizations and stuff like that. So, you know what? The beauty part about doing this podcast is I get to meet people like you. I'm seeing Craig Peters and Bill Apter all the time now, and I haven't seen him in like 30 years. It's wonderful. My life is very, very fulfilling right now. And
What
it's fulfilling because I get to know people like you too, Ian, and I really appreciate it.
well, we all appreciate you, and we're thrilled that you invite us onto your platform from time to time.
Well, come back soon. You know what we're gonna talk about? I wanna have you on the show sometime when you don't write a book, just to have you on here to get your impressions of things that are going on and other looks back into your wrestling past that I think people would like to know about.
Bring me on with Brian.
That would be fun. Oh my gosh. You know what? I would just sit back with popcorn, and let you both talk. I mean, that would work beautifully. Hey, who
All right,
needs
well,
me? "Hey, guys, here's Brian and Ian. I'll see you at about 45," and then you guys just go.
let's see if he's game.
You know what? I'll bring it up to him because, like I said, I know him socially now, so I think maybe I can make that work. So
Beautiful.
guys, look for the Ian Douglas, Brian Solomon, Bob Smith triumvirate coming soon to a podcast app near you. Folks, it's Ian Douglas. Thanks again, my friend.
Thank you, Bob.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, as Howie Rose says in all those Mets radio games, put it in the books. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ian Douglas, for all your help, all your appearances here, and just for being a great fellow. And I mean that sincerely. No joking around. The wrestling business needs more people like Ian Douglas, and Oliver Lee Bateman, too, for that matter. The best of the best, real journalists, slumming with us old timers in looking at old school pro wrestling, and in Ian's case, very old school pro wrestling. Thank you also to Joe Puccio, always a delight. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Say what you want. The Outdated Wrestling Hour and the Outdated Entertainment Hour are productions of Bob Smith Podcasts, for whatever that's worth. We're also associated with the WrestleCopia Wrestling Podcast Network. Check them out. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. All of our episodes are at a press of a button. They're for you. I will never Patreon old episodes unless I somehow engage in a new business model. Anything is possible, but for right now, listen up. I really appreciate it. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with BB King on my main page. I'm also at all the other apps. Try outdated _Bob. Underscore is a thing, not a word. Or just plain Bob Smith. I'm at all of them. You'll find me. I use the same wizzled old publicity photo of me with wonderful longish hair and actually looking decent in front of a poster that I believe is about the New Orleans Jazz Festival or Montreux. I don't remember. I have to go look at it. Anyway, you can find me easy enough if you want to talk. We got a lot of cool stuff coming up in the future, and we want you to be part of it. We hope you come back for our next podcast a week from now. We hope you check out the Outdated Entertainment Hour sometime, where we look at regular old entertainment as opposed to just pro wrestling, with myself and an array of star guests as our star guests, as Benny Hill used to say. So that's it for now. Ian Douglas, thanks. All you guys listening, thanks. Double. We'll see you next time. In the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.